So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name's Jordan. I'm the Sustainability Education Officer at North Sydney Council. And this webinar tonight is part of our Green Event program, where we run a number of different topics on focusing around urban sustainability. For the month of October, we're focusing on food production. And this is the first webinar for the month. So a great way to start October with this Farm It Forward project. And I'd also like to acknowledge that this webinar is being run in partnership with Ku-ring-gai Council. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of custodians of North Sydney, the Camaragal people, pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And also just want to mention that I was just really delighted when I found out about the Farm It Forward project. And although we don't offer this program in North Sydney or Ku-ring-gai, I think it's just a fantastic project that ticks all the boxes: community building and food production and so many different areas there that it was worth featuring, having a bit of inspiration for the spring planting season. And just to hear about what other people are doing outside of metropolitan Sydney. So yeah, I think that's sort of why we're featuring this project tonight, and yeah, looking forward to sort of hearing more about it. The format for tonight will be some informal presentations from the speakers. Then we'll have a speaker panel discussion, and then a Q&A. So feel free to use the chat box, send through any questions that you might have for any of the guest speakers, and we'll do our best to either address them as we go along or address them at the end in the Q&A. I think that's all the welcome stuff I need to do. Yeah, so I'd just like to welcome the speakers. And firstly, the MC for tonight, Anthea Fawcett, who is the Managing Director of Foodswell and also the host of Nourishing Matters podcast. Also, Manu, who is the coordinator of the Farm It Forward program, and Sylvia, who's sitting next to her. She is the host of a Farm It Forward plot in the Blue Mountains. And James who will also be speaking tonight. He is a urban farmer with the Farm It Forward program in the Blue Mountains. And also Catherine Clare, who is local land care coordinator of Hawkesbury Nepean Network. Yeah, so welcome all the speakers, and Anthony, passing it on to you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Jordan. Thanks so much. Thanks for the intro, and thank you and North Sydney and Ku-ring-gai councils for the opportunity to get together for this webinar and to hear from our guests about Farm It Forward. It's such a pleasure to meet you all, Manu, Sylvia, James and Catherine. Jordan's just introduced who you are, so that's really looking forward to hearing your stories and your perspectives on Farm It Forward, how it adds value to your communities and what you do. I'm joining you from the beautiful traditional land of the Birrabirragal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and also traditional custodians across Australia, and to thank them really sincerely for their love and care of country and for generously sharing their knowledge and culture with us. So thanks everyone for coming along. With such beautiful weather and with lockdown, at least in New South Wales, heading toward an end, it's a really great time to get outdoors and into the garden and to reconnect with friends, and possibly to even meet new people in and around gardening for diverse and fun good reasons, a lot of which we'll be hearing about from our wonderful speakers. So thank you for them for coming to share. Before I ask Manu to share the Farm It Forward story and join all of our guests in a sort of fairly free-flowing discussion, excuse me, I thought I might help the scene with a little intro about urban agriculture generally and here in Sydney, and why I was so excited when I first came across Farm It Forward. If you're a keen gardener or were at the last Green Events webinar with the amazing Tony Salter, the veggie lady, or perhaps you're involved with your local community garden, you're no doubt already more than aware of the huge groundswell of interest that there is in urban agriculture and in support for local and regional producers and farmers markets, all very topical to tonight's discussion. And here's some interesting food for thought. According to Nick Rose from Sustain, around the world, there are some 800 million people growing food in cities, and 20% of food consumed around the globe is actually grown in cities. And looking forward, it won't be long before 70% of the world's population lives in cities. So with more extreme weather events, supply chain shocks, look at the UK right now with our truck drivers, produce gluts, think strawberries and pineapples right here at home right now, and supply deficits, apparently coffee prices are about to surge around the world due to climate-related production losses in Brazil. We kind of all know and feel that whether it's for reasons of self-provisioning, resilience, sustainability, food supply and security, or just for everyday pleasure, one way or another, urban agriculture just makes an enormous amount of sense. And there's some great models getting underway, and Farm It Forward is, a cracker. Urban agriculture takes many forms and can help build lots of community and health and wellbeing benefits, as well as growing great fresh food and contributing to urban greening and improved habitats in our cities for biodiversity. And of course, it's something that's long been done in different ways. And I imagine many of us are familiar with the idea of the victory or the thrift gardens of World War II and more recent variations on them. At the Urban Food Forum convened by Sustain earlier this year, Chris Blythe from UK's Social Farms and Gardens, that's a network of over 200 city and school farms and 1,000 community gardens in the UK, gave a keynote that was all about care farming and gardening, its growth, challenges and benefits. And he also raised the definitional question of what is urban agriculture. Chris is inclined to call urban agriculture urban food production that finds a market that is sold, and to call the many other great school and other food gardening and farming activities that deliver therapeutic, training and mental health sorts of benefits, care farming and gardening. It's just interesting food for thought to think about the great diversity of benefits and reasons why people do food gardening. However you look at the definition or the focus of urban agriculture, COVID has seen a surge of food gardening for enjoyment and for other reasons, for food, physical activity, and for stress relief, fit for purpose and fit for people of all ages. Apparently there's been some 30% more people giving food gardening, sorry, it's my acoustic fluffy blanket there, a go in Sydney and elsewhere over the past year or so. So it's really surging. Something Chris Blythe also said was that pre-COVID, food relief organisations were often not that interested in connecting with or buying from community gardens. But that's something that COVID has changed a lot in the UK, and I think we're beginning to see that here in Australia too. We know that COVID has driven significant, really significant increased demand upon food relief organisations such as Foodbank and Second Bite, as many individuals and families face really tough financial times. In Sydney, there's a growing number of crop swap, that's a tongue twister, groups and local gardening support groups like Grow It Local. I don't know if you know about them, as well as great resources that people like Tony, the veggie lady, have developed for Sydney region gardeners. And in Sydney, our peri-urban areas are really, really important fruit and veg production areas, not only for Sydney, but also for all of New South Wales during the year. And Catherine, who's with us tonight, will talk about the Farm It Forward model and what it offers to people in peri-urban areas such as the Hawkesbury Nepean area. Many councils have or are starting to plan to create urban agriculture policies and programs, and many of these build on community gardens and the great work that Community Gardens Australia have done, excuse me, over decades to support community groups and councils to establish and maintain community gardens. And you might be interested to know that Community Gardens Australia have just launched their new website with lots of fabulous resources on it, and you might like to check it out. And this year, the City of Sydney has signed up to the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, to push along action for urban agriculture. And Councillor Jess Miller, if you're online, bravo to you for that, because it's really, really huge. It's a real driver. There are 6 packed categories that embed recommended practical actions, real tools for cities and councils that are just really, really promising. And in mid-2020, during Melbourne's first long lockdown, and we're really thinking about everyone in Victoria, Sustain with Community Gardens Australia undertook the Pandemic Gardening Survey. Jordan, would you like to pop up that one little slide, just shows some of their findings, and I'll just keep talking. Yeah, so that report and Sustain have provided a fantastic report on their urban pandemic gardening survey report, and you can Google and download that from their site. But I just thought it'd be interesting to share some of their key findings, which are up on the screen, and a few other a few other interesting facts from the survey. Just over half of the respondents were over the age of 55, of which 27% of those people were over the age of 65. So I think that's really interesting. And the cultural background of people, reflected the wider Australian community. Respondents were overwhelmingly female, some 77%, and most respondents, over 70%, reported a lower household income than the national average, and about a quarter of respondents reported a household income below 50,000, and that's below the poverty line if you're a family of 4. So growing food really makes a difference. Almost half of the respondents grew less than 10% of their own food, but more than a third were growing 10 to 30% of the food, and the remaining 14% said that they grew more than 30% of their own food. Jordan, if you'd like to take that slide off. As everyone's. So we know that COVID has impacted upon the social and emotional well-being of many people, especially the young and older people who may live at home alone and are really unable to connect with people. COVID has, for many people, intensified feelings of social isolation and disconnection. And local outdoor activities like food gardening and visits can be a really attractive therapeutic way to connect with people in your street or community and to foster intergenerational connections and support. During COVID, many food relief and other community organisations who rely upon volunteers have not only experienced increased demand for their services, but at the same time, they've also lost the volunteer services of many people, but particularly many semi and fully retired older people who have been unable to participate in volunteer activities or have just been really anxious to. And many of those people really miss the opportunity to give back and the social experience of volunteering. So I suppose I'm just flagging that there's all this latent social capital, people wanting to reconnect and enjoy interacting with their people and giving back. So to farm it forward at last. I first heard about this fantastic program about 18 months ago from Peter Dorr, who is the youth community greening leader with the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney. And we caught up, and it was during the bushfires, and we were talking about how to support local communities from where we both sat and worked, and how could we contribute to social and emotional recovery and local resilience efforts. And Farm It Forward, and he said, "Oh, you've got to know about Farm It Forward." So what especially drew me to learn more about them was particularly the idea of connecting homeowners or renters, that is people with backyards, private urban space, with people who might not have space but who would like to grow food, and to help people of different generations to connect and grow new friendships as well as enjoying growing food together. So those ideas found their way into 2 research projects that 2 environmental social work students who did work experience with me earlier this year. So that was interesting. And tonight we had the chance to hear and learn a whole lot more about Farm It Forward and why it's growing here in Sydney and elsewhere. Okay, Manu, if you'd like to take yourself off mute. You're the founder and the coordinator of Farm It Forward. Can you tell us the story about what it is, how it works, and I don't know, something about how you came up with the idea for it and then put it into action with your partners and your community?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along. Okay, the whole thing really began with my own personal journey into food growing. I personally got into growing my own food after having a very serious episode of postnatal depression. And it was a really something that I found a lot of therapy in, and also a sense of purpose and a sense of being able to have some hope and being able to do something that would benefit my children and all of those kinds of things. So that's where it really began, the crux of it. I started working for the local food co-op. And very, very luckily, when I started learning about permaculture, I was able to work on Springwood Community Garden, which was a bushfire recovery project after the 2013 bushfires. And there again, it was really about growing food, healing through growing food. A lot of people had lost their gardens, lost their 30-year-old, 40-year-old fruit trees. And there was a sense of grief around that. And there again, there was a very big element of intergenerational contact as well, because in that Springwood Community Garden, there is a very there were groups of young people and groups of older people, and it was all about how to design something that would bring them together. So that was kind of at the infancy of the Farm It Forward concept. And then after that, I worked for the local food co-op and was the garden coordinator there. The local food co-op had this really clever backyard grower system where people could come in, bring their glut of produce in and swap it for store credit within the store, which was really great. And my job at the co-op was to go and visit people's gardens so that they could register with us, just to make sure that they were growing organically and not using any pesticides and things like this. So I got to visit a lot of food gardens in the Blue Mountains. And what I realized, I must have visited over 100 food gardens in the Blue Mountains. What I realized was that there were a lot of people, older people or young families with children, who were quite socially isolated. So when I would rock up to have a look at their garden, I would stay there for 2 hours and have a wonderful chat with them. And there were also a lot of younger people walking through the doors at the food co-op going, yes, I want to eat ethical foods. I want to grow ethical food, but no way I could afford land. No way I could ever find a place of my own. And where am I supposed to be growing my food if I don't have access to land? So those were the two things. And so those, the people who were a little bit older and maybe didn't have the mobility to be able to make their areas as productive as they would have liked. And also younger families with small children who, oh my goodness, are so busy that they're unable, again, to make their areas and their land as productive as they would like. And then on the other hand, there were these young people walking through the doors going, I really, really, I'm really, really passionate about growing food regeneratively. I want to learn how to do it. But where am I going to do it? It's too expensive to own land. All I can do is rent and, and all of that. So it was really just a matter of putting our heads together with a couple of those younger people, Jack and Olive and Nick. And the four of us kind of just put our heads together and went, okay, how can we, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And that's how we started to design Farm It Forward. It took us 3 or 4 months before, or actually more, 5 or 6 months to come up with something we were happy with and come up with a holistic context before we actually started our first plot. So it took some time of thought, and also it took some time to put everything in place so that we could apply for funding to get going. So that also was an element. So that was 3 years ago now. And yeah, that's how Farm It Forward started.
And And it's a social enterprise, isn't it? So tell us how it works.
Yeah, it is. So it's a that means that we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we employ young people to grow food on land that's kind of leased from those people that I was talking about before. So people who are more time poor or have less mobility than they would like, or would just simply like their land to be used for productive purposes and would like to see young people locally employed to learn how to do that. So yes, that's how Farm It Forward works. We don't lease the land for money. We lease the land for vegetables. So the residents receive vegetables in return for the use of their land. And we also, of course, cover if we need to use town water, et cetera, we cover all those costs of town water, et cetera. And all of our infrastructure is all done by us. It's all, and it's all removable unless the resident is very happy for us to put more permanent things in.
Mm-hmm. And so sort of just, roughly how many people are involved? I think that you've got some full-time farmers and you've got volunteers, and tell us about the footprint of who's involved.
Okay, so there's 4 of us farming, growing food on the land, but that's paid farmers. And then on top of that, we have probably a pool of about 10 to 20 really, really regular keen bean volunteers who come very regularly. Mm-hmm. And then we have 8 households that are the residents that own the land that we grow food on. And then we sell to different cafes and restaurants, I think 3 or 4, correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy. And then we also sell to the local co-op as well. So, and we're about to start actually selling direct through a market stall to our community.
Oh, that's exciting. I think that's the subject of your spring fundraiser, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I'll be drilling about you about that a little bit later on.
Yeah. On your website, it says, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it says you've over the years you've produced something like 10,000. Is it 10,000 tons of food? Is that right?
10 tons. Oh, so 10
tons. Yes.
Yeah, over 10 tons, more than 10 tons. It's lost count at 10 tons.
That's a serious amount of food. And can you tell us about just the size or the feel of the gardens? Like you mentioned, you've got 8 households, and I think people who share their land or share farm their land and get veggies in return. What's the footprint of the actual market gardens, all up?
Okay, so all together we have about 1.5 acres of land under food production. So that is the size of an average medium-sized market garden, which is great. Sylvia's plot, for instance, used to be a tennis court in the 1900s. So back in the time where they used to use termite mounds, dismantled mounds, and use the sand as the floor for tennis courts. So yeah.
So that must have been quite challenging to turn that into a productive garden bed.
Yeah, we started with, we did have to build the soil from scratch, yeah.
And 4 of you are paid farmers, and if people visit your website, they can see the amazing partners that you've had along the way. Is who pays your salaries, or pays your who provides the funding for you to be paid? Has that come via youth and juvenile justice, or aged caring, or aged care services, or grants, or just can you give a picture of how you've pulled that all together? Because obviously you do a lot that adds value to your local council's youth and aged care services.
Yeah, so we've had a varying revenues. So to begin with, the first year we had a youth opportunities. We got a youth opportunities grant with the New South Wales government, and that allowed us to pay our young people for the first year, which was really, really helpful. as we were just starting out, et cetera, because market gardens don't start producing straight away. And also we were learning as we went. So yeah. The revenue from our vegetables is quite good, and it pays 30 to 40% of our overall wages, which is not too bad. And then we also get, we apply for public funding wherever we can. But we actually very recently crunched some serious numbers and realized that we could completely, in order to be more resilient, we were able to cover all of our wages just by selling direct to the community, sell our vegetables direct to the community.
That's fantastic. That's a real, an enterprise with all the social bang for all the effort. I think somebody's just asked a question, and I was just going to ask you. A big part of what you do is training and permaculture workshops and youth engagement and activities in and around the garden, isn't it? Is that right? I think when we chatted just quickly by phone the other day, you mentioned that you're hoping to do more with high schools and with mental health for students, and that you regularly have gardening workshops. Is that right?
That's right. So before this stuff came through, we had 2 different high school groups coming every week, and they would come in and do some market gardening with us. That said, it was really that we leave it really open. We don't really enforce anything with high school kids. We're just happy that they're out, that they're there, and we have a therapy dog, and being out and just in contact with soil makes us happy. So even if they're sitting and hanging out while we do some planting or market gardening, that's enough for us, really. We have seen that it's had a huge benefit in those different classes that we're coming to visit. One of them was Blue Mountains Youth College, which is affiliated with Blacktown Youth College, and these are kids from extremely disadvantaged backgrounds. And it is very challenging, and it is but the benefits that you can just see it's just really wonderful, so we do a lot of youth outreach. So far we've been doing it for free, but pretty soon we will have to charge for our youth outreach programs, just so that we can make sure that our staff is properly trained and up to date with child protection and youth mental health, et cetera, because those are all really necessary skills when you're doing youth outreach.
And you can allocate time and maybe even employ more people. Yeah. There was a question I think I just saw come up, which I've got sort of further down in the question, so it might be nice to talk about it now. There's quite a few offsprings or shoots of a farm at Forward, aren't there? Are there? I think on your website, or when we've chatted, you've said that you've had links with groups in Hobart and Melbourne and Brisbane who've started similar projects to Farm It Forward. Is that right?
Absolutely. We really regularly hold conversations and little Zoom discussions with people who would like to get Farm It Forward going in their local area. So we've had people from everywhere, from Queensland, Western Australia, South Australia, Melbourne, Victoria, just all over the place. And it's been really heartwarming to see. I think it's a case of, you can do it. It's fantastic. Seeing it happening, I think, is a real catalyst for others to give it a go as well.
And Manu, would you like Jordan to share some of your pictures now? Just quickly flick through them and describe what they are. Is that a good time to do that now?
Sure. Yep. Oh. All right. So so there's Jimmy. Jimmy's here with us tonight on the right hand side. and in the middle is Hannah, and next to Hannah is Matt. So Hannah and Jimmy are the two of our farmers, and Matt is one of our super regular volunteers that helps us with harvest. Yeah, so it's just to show you a pic of the team that farm at the moment that are growing the food. They're holding salad mix bags. So we have been really successful in growing salad mix, and it's really popular with cafes and local cafes and restaurants, and it's also really popular with individuals. So we started selling our bags of salad mix, and it's beautiful. It's organic, or it's regeneratively grown, and it's locally grown. The amount of bags of salad mix that people go through in 1 week, if you think about it, you could totally grow that locally with absolutely very little effort. The beautiful thing is that they're completely compostable cellophane bags with a cellophane sticker on them, with a compostable sticker on them, and that means that on top of it, you are just annihilating the huge amount of plastic that goes with buying punnets of salad mix, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is one of our volunteer sessions. So on top of doing youth outreach, and those are really geared sessions with high school kids, we also have a general volunteer session every week, once a week, on a different plot of ours. And those volunteer sessions are really diverse. This image really shows you really well that it's all different ages that come along to our volunteer sessions, and you pick up so much knowledge just, by doing and being a part of it. The boy in the foreground, in fact, Jude, is a really, he's a really lovely 14-year-old boy who's so he just loves Farm It Forward so much, and he's just started selling his rocket outside his mum's health food store as well, so it's pretty sweet. And he was really happy that day because he was injured and could not go to school and come to the volunteer session.
Fantastic.
This is one of our volunteers, very long time, again, really long time volunteers. So we find that our volunteers have been coming for years now. And I think it's because there's a real social benefit, and there's a real sense of purpose to having a regular thing to do that is extremely wholesome for the community. And this is Sophie, and she's been coming to help us harvest and coming to volunteer sessions for years now.
Fantastic.
This is one of our youth outreach sessions. So I was saying before, we have geared youth outreach sessions with kids from different special community schools, kids that have special needs and come from quite disadvantaged backgrounds. And we just see it's hugely beneficial just for kids to come and hang out with us. This is outside Headspace. Katoomba Headspace is a youth mental health organisation that provides free mental health services for young people in the mountains. And they gave us a call and said, look, do you want to set up a Farm It Forward plot in our garden? Because, and we said yes. So we went and set up a plot, and the kids came to help us every Thursday morning to plant out, etc., etc. It's looking a little bit bare there because it was the peak of winter, so there was nothing growing there.
That's me.
So this is a beautiful photo of one of our farmers and also one of our co-founders, Jack and Sylvia. And this was during the bushfires, so the Black Summer bushfires, and you can see Jack's wearing a P2 mask, and you can see by the red sort of tinge of the photo, we were right in the midst of it. And it was incredibly heartwarming because volunteers still came every single time. No one never missed a beat, and we grew so much food that summer. It was incredible.
That's amazing.
And it was in the middle of the drought, and we managed, and we used ingenious methods of being really efficient with our water, and we did it, didn't we?
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. So now that we've seen Sylvia in her garden or near it, it's a lovely chance to ask Sylvia and James, tell us about how you're involved with the Farm It Forward, and you know, what you especially like about it, or you know, what you particularly do as part of it all. Sylvia, would you like to go first? Manu's already mentioned that you're a lovely old, you know, tennis court from the 1900s is a key big garden at your place. That sounds fantastic.
It was lovely to hand that over to Manu and all the other farmers. I had been trying to clear the scrub from it as a hobby. My way of gardening was just trying to chop down scrub rather than do productive things. My main assistants before Manu and team were wallabies.
Right.
And if I could chop down the scrub, then the wallabies might come in and look after the undergrowth for me.
Yeah. Biodiversity in action.
And my other thing that I'm very much aware of is I retired about 10 years ago and made the big decision not to downsize. Most people, I'm 77 now, and most people my age 10 years ago were advising each other to downsize. And I thought, well, I have lived on this beautiful property. It's actually a 5-acre bush block. I've lived on it all my working life and not had time to relax and enjoy it. Why should I have to give it up now that I'm retiring? And most people said to me, you're mad, you can't stay on a big block. Other people don't even stay in a suburban sized block when they retire. And I knew I'd need help, and I didn't know what sort of help it was going to be. I have got children, and it's not that I don't have help, but I didn't want to be dependent on my children. And I knew I needed help, and I didn't know what it would be, but I knew I wanted to enjoy my beautiful property in old age. And it just evolved, didn't it, Manu? So to me, the help is sharing. Well, it's the help of sharing. We're helping each other, but it's also, I've always had a passion for the environment that comes through from my parents and grandparents. They were all botanists and geologists and scientists, and very conscious of the needs of the environment. So that's been born into me. But I knew I can't do everything myself. No one can save the world on their own. So as well as the friendship and just sharing, it's also feeling as though just by sharing, I'm doing a tiny bit that one human being can do for the environment.
It's fantastic. And Sylvia, how did you meet Manu?
I met her at the co-op. I shopped at the co-op, and Manu was the gardener in charge. The co-op has a little garden out the back, which opens, well, to my knowledge, once a year. When the Mid-Mountains Garden Festival opened, I could go through the gate and into that little garden. And so I managed to speak to Manu over the garden fence, I suppose, and just said, if ever you need a bit more land, give me a ring.
This was, I have to say, this was maybe, I remember Sylvia telling me this, and this must have been in 2015. And I remembered, and I said, Sylvia, I can't right now, but I promise I'll find a way.
And I didn't mind waiting, because I'm a fairly easygoing person. And
And Sylvia,
coping on my own on the well, I'm not on my own on the property. One of my adult kids lives here with me, but I knew I needed more help, but I wasn't in a hurry. I was quite happy just to have the wallabies helping while I waited, and not knowing what was going to emerge.
And Sylvia, has the garden changed the way you eat? Or not really? Were you always a keen fruit and veg eater, or have you just found you've got more diversity and access to more diverse foods?
The change is being able to go for a walk in the morning. I'm a morning person, and pluck some vegetables for the evening meal. I'm already thinking about the evening meal in the morning, and before Farm It Forward, I had to do that process by going to the shop. Now I do it by going for a walk in the garden without having, I always say, without having had to do the work myself. That's lazy of me, but I do say to myself, well, I am retired. I did do my working years.
No doubt.
I love being able to go and
fantastic
for my dinner. Yeah,
beautiful. Beautiful. Jay, thanks so much, Sylvia. It's a gorgeous story, and I'd love to visit your garden. James, tell us about you and your role with Farm It Forward and how long you've been with them.
Yeah, so I started off volunteering with Farm It Forward. I was good friends with Jack, who, as Manu said, was a co-founder and helped to set it up. And yeah, I just started coming along to hang out with my mate originally. And then, yeah, I just found it was I'd just moved to the mountains, so I was quite new to the area.
Yeah.
And it just felt really immediately plugged into a community straight away, and everything around it was really positive and like just felt really wholesome, and just had a really good feel to it, everything that was going on. And yeah, being someone who's quite sustainably minded, like when I started learning more about how it worked and everything, I became more intrigued. And yeah, just eventually, after coming to pretty much every volunteer session from when I found out about it, eventually Nick, one of the other co-founders, he left to go and study elsewhere, and I was offered his position. So yeah, that's kind of how I got involved. And now I'm just, yeah, we're just doing our thing. We're farming. I'm, yeah, look after one of the plots here, and yeah,
James,
just learning more and more about gardening and getting that experience. It's one of those, it's kind of a slow learning thing. Like I've been doing this for almost 2 years now, and I'm really just, at the start of my journey. It's
so did you have any gardening skills when you started? I mean, or had you had prior experience, or have you pretty much been, learning and growing with the project as you've worked with it in terms of your gardening skills, food gardening skills?
Yeah. Look, I had, when I was, I think I must have been around year 6 or something, quite young. My grandfather helped me set up a veggie plot, and I grew for 1 season, and I loved that then. I used to get really early and water my veggies before school. And then my family kind of moved house, and that fell to the wayside, but it was many years. I guess my grandfather kind of planted the seed there, but
yeah, in
terms of practical experience, I had very little, but definitely found a passion, and
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And Sylvia and James, thank you for sharing that. It's just fabulous, and you obviously just love what you're doing, and the people you've met and so on. It's almost an unfair question, but I always sort of like to just ask this: is if I asked you if there was just one key highlight or a thing that you most love about the program, what would it be? What would you describe as the thing you most love about Farm It Forward? That's an unfair question.
It's a difficult one. I reckon I'd have to say just how much it can have a positive impact, and like having seen that like over and over, like just how its ability to have a positive impact on people's life and on their well-being, like, and you see it especially with the volunteer sessions and with the kids. Like, it's really powerful to see that happen over and over, and to experience that firsthand.
Fantastic. Sylvia, you've already described some beautiful things. Is there a highlight for you?
Yes, the interactions between the generations is something I really appreciate. Not at my age having to be stuck with only, I mean, I love my friends who are my age, but it's lovely to have friends of different ages. So I'm thinking that and nature at the same time, and also art. It's somehow, even though we haven't talked about art at all, somehow art and culture is drawn into the mix somehow. I don't think I can explain in a word how, but it just feels as though it is.
Oh, that's lovely. Everybody, I don't know if you know that Farm It Forward have got a gorgeous spring fundraiser on at the moment, and Manu might tell us a little bit more about that later. But talking about art, some of the lovely treats and giveaways and things you can purchase include some really exquisite drawings and artwork. And I imagine, Manu, you and others have been responsible for those. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we made... we just came up with making seeded cards. We just thought, how are we going to have people connect with each other because there was bang smack in the middle of the lockdown. So we were like, wow, how can we just get people to connect with each other and grow food while we have to put our things on pause? So we came up with this idea of having seeded paper and making cards that people could send to each other, saying, thinking of you, put this card in some soil and it'll grow you lettuce. So yes, you can get those from our crowdfunding campaign. Jump on our crowdfunding campaign, everyone. It's all over our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. And if you go onto donate in our website, you'll find it as well.
Fantastic.
I'll make sure I share all those links after the event and send it through to everyone by email.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a beautiful card called Let Us All Be Kind to Everyone. It's just
beautiful. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we've spoken about the other beautiful offshoots from Farm It Forward. I know that there's growing farmers in Melbourne that's had a lot of media. I think that might be one of them. And you know, that's all linked up with the amazing Katie Payne, I think, and Sustainable Table and those amazing Victorian powerhouses in urban agriculture and all the rest. So we've touched on that already a bit. Catherine, you're currently drawing on the Farm It Forward model to possibly set up a chapter or something similar in the Hawkesbury Nepean region. Would you like to tell us all about that and how it fits with your work with land care and working with local peri-urban landholders and farmers in your area? Because there's a long tradition of agriculture there and cultural diversity and all the rest, and some incredible opportunities, I imagine. Can you take us through the story of what you're doing?
Thanks, Anthea. Yeah. So I know I got mentioned at the start. So I'm the local land care coordinator for the Hawkesbury Nepean Land Care Network. So we cover Penrith, Hawkesbury, Hills and Blacktown. And there's a very big mix of property owners throughout and within those government areas and regions. And the concept of Farm It Forward was something that got raised with me at the start of the job 2 years ago, because, as you said, Hawkesbury has an incredible history of being the food belt of Sydney, ever, you know, beyond before colonisation, obviously, with our traditional owners, but as well now and there's been a big shift from wheat to barley to orchards and dairy and there's a huge range in Hawkesbury. You've got the lowlands and the floodplains, and you've got the upper cooler climates. And between those regions, there's a big diversity of what gets grown. However, there has been a massive shift in the property ownership and that scale of ownership. And I didn't know the actual numbers before you really asked me to get them, Anthea. But looking at the rural strategy that Hawkesbury had put up, 62% of the rural land is now in blocks of less than 3 hectares, and 81% less than 8 hectares, which, if you compare that to the normal scale of what farms would be, is quite different. And the issue was raised that, you know, this is an area of highly fertile soil, beautiful climates. It's within the city. It's a beautiful place to be growing food, but with the shift in the demographics and the size of properties, the food value of that land has been lost. And how do you reconnect to the land? How do we reconnect with growing food even on a smaller scale, not as commercial farming, but as market gardening and as growing things locally in our own backyards, which, you know, perfectly fits with what Manu's been doing with Farm at Fort in the Blue Mountains. We've had a few challenges in a sense that the scale is a little bit different. Hawkesbury is quite large, so it's Blue Mountains, but I think we started on too big of a scale. And being able to find or potentially promote the opportunity to have young growers there. Like Manu said, she started with funding, and that's been quite difficult to source without a strong group of community members committed to this, but it hasn't dropped off at all. And there is a huge passion for food and growing food in the Hawkesbury. There's multiple veggie barter pages, which are, you know, incredibly active. There's loads of community gardens, all which include growing food, and loads of market gardens, loads of opportunities for people to visit farms and actually pick fruit themselves or visit farmers markets. We've got Hawkesbury, it's now Market Gardens and Trails, but in the Hawkesbury, people can actually register as farmers, and you can look up the farms that you can visit or buy produce from directly. And there's there's a lot of tourism around food. There's a lot of community engagement around food, and the value, like Manu said, and Jimmy has said as well, that mental health aspect, the community connection aspect is a really big thing. And we're trying to develop a way of doing that similar to what Manu has done that fits the Hawkesbury. But yeah, it's a very exciting space. Fruit trees, I think, in our region has been a big focus. The hills, especially in Hawkesbury, you know, you've got orchards from citrus all the way up to stone fruits, and everything in between. And a lot of properties that have been subdivided do keep those remnant trees, but the knowledge is lost on how to care for those trees properly. So we're considering running a program about that to help connect people to their food and what's in their garden already a little bit more.
Oh, that's amazing. That's almost like retrofitting people's gardens and retrofitting skills for new landowners and subdivisions. That's really, really, and gosh, in the wake of the bushfires, I mean, the region you're talking about really copped it, didn't it? And
it is, yeah. And a lot of the communities turned to actually starting veggie gardens and community gardens as a way to support their community. Like Manu said, it's you develop a sense of community, but also a sense of hope and a sense of, you know, I don't want to say control, but the ability to be able to actively do something when you're waiting for other things to heal themselves. You can start to heal and do something hands-on.
I think I don't know about you, but I certainly feel a bit like that with COVID. The ability just to have control over something which delivers an outcome and nurtures you in one way or another is really, really important, isn't it? Manu and James, will you be helping Catherine or working with Catherine? Or no doubt you've already been chatting and sharing ideas. Would you like to comment on that? Will you be working more in the Hawkesbury Nepean region or just providing tips?
yeah, we're always around for some guidance, and Catherine is an absolute wonderful, wonderful friend. So it's great. It's so lovely to see. And this friendship came out of of Catherine getting in touch and going, whoa, I want to get Farm Forward going. So yeah, and we'll do everything that we can to help get it happening.
It's pretty exciting because you're in the peri-urban region, like, you know, you are within reach of each other, but with really different social capital and assets in terms of people's backyards, whether it's a backyard like Sylvia's, or in the Hawkesbury and Nepean, these sort of 5-acre subdivisions, which still have really productive land, and in many cases incredible fruit and other trees that could be looked after and brought back into production. It's really exciting.
Yeah, a big point of difference, unfortunately, between the Hawkesbury and the Blue Mountains is the council perspective.
Wow.
So here in the Blue Mountains, we're very lucky. We have a council that is very understanding of protecting the environment and growing regeneratively and all of those things. Other councils are have less agendas around that. Have less
ambitions.
ambitions around doing something in that respect. So there is a big point of difference there in terms of funding. We got some funding from our local council to actually keep going with this program, and it's been wonderful. And yeah, so councils, it's really important to vote people in that will really safeguard and support these kinds of programs happening.
And you can have urban agriculture policies, as we talked about with the Milan Pact. And I think the Blue Mountains, I remember reading some amazing article that they actually have a council policy which puts first the rights of nature, like they've signed up to the rights of nature. Yeah. Okay. Okay, how are we going for time? Probably moving along. So Farm It Forward, great model. You can adapt it for different contexts and for a whole lot of different reasons and benefits. So just put your thinking caps on and maybe connect with people in your street even, or with people in your school, or with other groups that might be in your region. I'm thinking of Ku-ring-gai Council and that sort of area. You know, there are other voluntary sort of garden related organisations like the Easy Care Garden organisation, which is already an active volunteer group, which is where people volunteer to help older people stay in their homes and look after their gardens to keep them safe and without hazard. But obviously, just another tweak, or there's a network to hook up with. And North Sydney, many people living in apartments and very quite dense, but lots of wonderful community gardens and on the street programs and so on. And I don't know, perhaps you could hook up with big backyard owners in Ku-ring-gai. Okay. Perhaps just towards a bit of a wrap up and towards question time, Manu, can you tell us about any big plans or changes on the horizon to grow Farm It Forward, and perhaps tell us a little bit more about what you're fundraising for with the spring fundraiser?
Yes, so it really we're in our second full year of growing food, and we realized, we had to go through all of the different things that we went through: the bushfires, the drought, the bushfires, COVID-1, COVID-2, in order to see, where the precarious parts of our model were. So we managed to figure out that selling vegetables for resale is problematic, that farmers really, small local regenerative farmers need to sell direct. The revenue from selling their vegetables needs to go solely to them and nobody else, in order for them to really make a decent living, revenue to keep going and to make the operation sustainable. This is essential, really, really important aspect. If anyone, and I'm sure many people would be asking themselves, okay, how do we make this something that can keep going? Yes, money is a very tricky thing, but it is also very important to make something viable and sustainable in the long run. And that is one of the key elements. And that's why we are really transitioning to selling direct to our community via weekly market stall. And that's what we're raising money for, because we would like to set up a mobile market stall on a trailer so that we can go and sell our veggies throughout the Blue Mountains. Yes, the Blue Mountains is quite tricky. You kind of need a vehicle to get around and to get to everybody that needs you. And so a market stall on a trailer is the perfect solution. We've just recently partnered up with our local neighbourhood centre, which runs 3 different neighbourhood centres, one in the lower mountains, one in the mid mountains, and one in the upper mountains, which means that they will allow us to park our trailer in their car parks and sell food to all of our Blue Mountains community directly.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Catherine, there was a lovely story, a little bit similar, but I was speaking to friends who have family working in Wilcannia, and obviously with COVID, hectic times there, and the food store had to shut because of, for a period of time because of infections. And I think the Hawkesbury Helping Hands filled up their cars and vehicles and drove from Hawkesbury to Wilcannia with a whole lot of food. It's a segue, but it's kind of a nice example of that sense of community. Catherine, thanks so much for sharing your story, and I really look forward to watching it grow and coming out and visiting you.
Sure. Anyone is always welcome to visit.
Yeah.
We'd always love to have, even faces, even if you can't always come regularly. I think that start of having a community, and not just that, the knowledge as well of people who know how to, and this is where a big part of where Manu and James came in, is they have the knowledge that our volunteers kind of were seeking, and how do we, transfer that knowledge on and keep learning in different ways, which is always really exciting.
Fantastic. Manu, Sylvia, James and Catherine, thank you so much. Any final comments or wrap-up thoughts you'd like to share before we go to Q&A, to questions? Otherwise, we can go straight to questions. But, just listening to each other chat, is there anything else? Is there anything else each of you might like to?
I would just say, and this comes from someone who's never grown food personally, but has seen a lot of people give it a go, a lot of we might call urbanites who have moved out to Hawkesbury and completely transformed properties into farms, is that like anyone can grow food. You just have to want to do it. If you're willing to learn and be part of the community, it's anyone can learn it. We all know how to do it. It's part of our genetics. We had to in the past. So give it a go if you've never thought about it, is what I would say. And find a way, find a local group. There's so much advice on how to do it, whether it's on a balcony or it's in your own backyard or joining a local community garden. If you want to do it, you can, and I reckon anyone should give it a go.
Sounds good to me. James, do you have any?
Yeah, I would second what Catherine has said. I would really encourage everyone to give it a go. Get your hands in the soil. Whatever your context is, there's always an option, and there's always someone in your community who is a grower and is passionate about it. So seek them out and have a crack.
Fantastic. Sylvia, anything?
Yes, the word share is what comes to my mind. Give that a go. Don't be afraid to share, whether it's sharing your garden, or whether it's sharing your labour, or whether it's sharing your produce, or whether it's sharing your thoughts and friendship. Give it a go. It's not what we're sort of expected to do by the mass media these days. But I'd say give sharing a go. Don't be scared to share.
Sounds good to me. Jordan and Manu, we might would you like, well, maybe we'll go to questions because I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you. Jordan, would you like
Yeah,
to?
sure. I'm just making the first one, I think, was from Tara, and Manu sort of answered that. She asked about, are there any other similar organisations in Australia? But where did the original idea come from? Was from other projects? Was it overseas or Australia? Where did you initially get that idea?
We came up with that. We just made it up as we went along, really.
Right.
Yes, so there are some similar things I found out later going on in the UK. I forget now. It's called. Do you remember what it's called, Jimmy?
Lend and Tend.
Lend and Tend. That's
Yeah.
right. Something similar in the UK happening called Lend and Tend. But apart from that, I'm not sure. We just made it up. Yes.
Sounds good. I'm just going through the questions here. This is from David. He says, this is a question for Sylvia. Unfortunately, I lost my wife to cancer recently, and I'm thinking about downsizing and moving to a different area and only relying on a community garden. How do you balance the needs of your own gardening with Farm It Forward? Is it a combination of sort of both? How do you balance that?
Well, it's a very big property, David. It's 5 acres. And so there are little nooks and crannies that Manu and team don't get to. If I have a feeling that I'm doing something myself, I'm not a very good gardener. I love to be in nature, but I'm pretty gung-ho. So I'm sure some of the hosts work with Manu and team on the shared plots, and I don't. I do go and harvest something for myself with permission, but for my own gardening, I generally have different little corners that I am trying to grow flowering shrubs and things that sort of look after themselves.
Yeah.
My sort of gardening's pretty makeshift, and I have got room for that on the property as well.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that really answers you, David, but it's how it works for me.
David, we go on a really case-by-case basis with each of our residents, depending on their needs and their wants. So, some of our residents contribute to the market gardening aspect, and others don't at all, and that's completely fine. So there's no really one size fits all. It's really on a case-by-case basis, and just really listening to what the resident is liking and what they're wanting to do, what they're not wanting to do, etc., and adapting to that. So there definitely needs to be some flexibility around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you find how many owners are sort of like to get directly hands-on and be involved in that food production side?
Not many are very involved. The whole point is for us to be doing that.
Yeah.
They don't have so much time or not so much. So it's not hugely common, but we do have, probably half of our landowners come along to the volunteer sessions relatively often, or their children do, or their parents do, or so it's it's all quite interconnected. So it's
and that sort of leads on to a question from Peter, who asks about how often do people meet on the property, and how does the landowner manage who comes onto the property and when? I'm assuming that's sort of a scheduled thing that you have arranged?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one farmer manages each property. So each of our farmers manages 2 properties, and it's always the same person looking after, like doing the regular, checking and planting, et cetera, et cetera. The volunteer sessions happen weekly on a different plot every week. So that means that as a landowner, you can decide you'd like to have a volunteer session on your plot or not. You can opt out of it if you're not comfortable with it. We don't give out addresses publicly on social media. So we have a group where we announce there's going to be a volunteer session, and people have to contact us directly, and we send them direct message of the address so that we're not putting people's addresses out on social media. And also there's a huge amount of good communication happening between the farmer who's in charge of that particular plot and the resident of that particular plot. So there's always lots of communication going on. Some residents prefer us to send them a quick text before we come and do some planting, or we come and do some checking of something. And others prefer that we just come and do it without letting them know or bothering them at all. So again, it's on a case-by-case basis. We just evaluate that and communicate really well amongst each other and there's a continuity. So the person, or the person in charge of your plot, so imagine I'm a resident, the person in charge of growing on your plot will remain the same throughout time. It right. Very rarely changes.
I see.
So there's continuity in that sense. And if you like, then once a month or once every couple of months, there might be a volunteer session on your plot if you're happy with it.
Yeah. So I would say just jumping in there, the emphasis is on the relationship between the farmer and the resident, and it's really it's just dependent on that particular person and that relationship. The farmer gets to understand the resident, and like residents have, like what Manu was saying, different preferences and different needs. Like some people have more anxiety around that, so prefer to have a lot of warning, but it's really like, and that changes over time too. Like residents tend to become more comfortable with the farmer and with the community. So it's always changing and evolving, but there's definitely an emphasis on that relationship and that good communication.
Yeah. So you've got about, you said, I think 8 sort of host plots. So, and there's 4 farmers. So you've got 2 each. Is that about right? And how much scope would you have if other plots wanted to join the mix? Like, what's a sort of, how many plots could you sort of manage per farmer?
Okay, so this is a really important question too. So after the Gardening Australia episode, we had a huge amount of people contact us and say, come and grow on our land. It's really important, and we had to turn them down. It's really important to know that we wouldn't be able to take on more than 2 plots each. This is probably the maximum we would each be able to take on. And it is you have to work within your ability. Something that I think we were quite wise to do was not take on too many plots for the people who could manage them. And so if we were to take on more land, then we would have to have the revenue to take on an extra person to look after it. Those 2 things go hand in hand, and it's important to know that. We can't just take on everybody's garden. We want to manage plots really well. We have a frequently asked question on our website on that, because we do get that a lot. Because people, say, oh, you're turning me down, I'm doing you a favor by offering you land. Well, actually, we've got to do it properly, and in order to do it well, you need to really do it within your ability and not over bite off more than you can chew.
Yeah. Anthony,
I just saw a really good question from Jane. Is it Jane Allen? Which is, are there any insurance safety or safety issues with having visitors to the properties? And it's a bit similar to the question you've just addressed.
So we have our own, so Farm It Forward has its own public liability insurance and its own insurance policy. So we do have a little contract that we write for our resident, and that we sign together. And one of the things is that we have our own insurance, and that the resident is in no way liable for anything that happens on a Farm It Forward plot or during a volunteer session. So it covers, our policy is a policy that also covers our volunteers. So that's an important thing. If you do want to get something going on in your local area, there has to be adequate insurance for it.
Was that difficult to obtain that insurance?
No, extremely easy, and it's not hugely expensive either, and you can get a community insurance broker to find you the right policy for free. So it's quite easy.
Right. Question from Sally, and I think this could be for all the speakers, about farming practices, and are there any guidelines around sustainability farming practices for the plots that you farm on?
Okay, so I have a background after, while I was designing Springwood Community Garden, I also studied soil microbiology. So I have a background in soil health and in permaculture. So it's really good to really get someone on board who knows a little bit about regenerative farming practices. Not all farming is good for the environment. You need to use sustainable practices. The good news is that at this kind of scale, the 1 to 2 acre scale, 1 to 2 acres altogether, you really can practice regenerative methods, easily practice regenerative methods of farming. There's heaps of info out there on how to do that. The Milkwood Permaculture blog is one of them. Jean-Martin Fortier in Canada, who wrote The Market Gardener, the book, is fantastic for this. And another great book is called How to Grow Vegetables by John Jeavons. And he practices a method that's regenerative that's called biointensive farming. And it's used in a lot of developing countries to grow a lot of food in a small area, and to do it regeneratively, regenerating soils.
Well, can you give us some practical examples of sort of what that actually means for an small urban plot?
Yeah. So what it means is, okay, so there's a couple of things. One is not using any, the baseline is not using any pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, of course. And the basis is really looking after soil health, which means healthy soil needs to have good microbes living in it, and good soil microbes need organic matter to live in. What is organic matter? Organic matter can be compost, homemade compost. It can be a composted manure, not chicken manure, that's a little bit too strong in nitrogen, but good ruminant cow manures, sheep manures, etc., etc. Right. You can get them in an aged form where they will add a lot of good organic matter and habitat for soil microorganisms, and protecting soils by covering them with mulch, covering them and protecting them from the sun, from sunlight, from erosion, from all of those issues. Yeah.
Great. Just sorting through some other questions. Anthony, if you see any, just jump in as well.
I'm doing a scan.
Yeah. I think you may have touched on this, but contracts with the hosts, is that, do you have a contract for them and lay that out?
We have a little written contract. It has a couple of important points. One is the insurance that I was talking about before. Another one is that we cover any cost of town water usage. So if we were to use town water, then we cover the cost of the use of town water. You can put a meter on a tap. So there are these Gardena meters that you can put on a tap that measure the amount of water usage, and then look at how much you've used and cover the cost of how much you've used of that water. And another thing is that all of our infrastructure is completely removable and movable. So that gives the host a bit of security around, yeah, there is an exit, there is an exit strategy. If things don't work out, we can revert it back to lawn with a 1 month notice period. So that's another really important aspect that we include in our little contracts. And that's all I can think of. That's all that we include.
Oh, probably the box of vegetables in
Yes,
exchange.
that's right.
Is that in the contract as well, is it?
That's right. So that we are to provide with what the host needs of vegetables
Right.
in either box form. And that, again, it's all communication. Different residents like to do different things. That some residents like to have a box. Other residents prefer to pick from their own gardens. So it's on a case-by-case basis there.
Yeah. We've got I think Anthea asked about sort of the pick one highlight, and we've got a question here asking all the speakers. So maybe we'll go around the room. Maybe we start with you, Catherine, about what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from your experience so far?
That's a tough one. I think for us, we did try to start a plot on Secret Gardens, and we had that predominantly with students, which was a bit of a challenge when all of their timetables changed. I think finding that consistency and a consistent format that works for the people that you're working with, whether or not that's people was a challenge. And then also finding a space. Manu had Littleton stores, and that was one of our biggest challenges as well. And we did find one at the Secret Gardens, but you need a space that you can meet on or sort produce or just have a chat about before you even start growing. I think that was one of our biggest lessons.
Yep. James, what about you?
I guess one of the big things I've learned is the kind of realization of the power of community, and like that there's really like so much knowledge and experience and goodwill in a community, and like how much you can, if you're able to harness that, what you can do with that is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say that's one of the main things, as well as a lot of a lot of growing knowledge and experience. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Sylvia or Manu?
Yes, it's something about sharing, which I've already spoken about, and something about not being in control. I haven't got a coherent argument to make yet. It's a new thought, but when you share, you're not the total boss. I mean, I am the owner, so in a way I'm the boss, but it's something, learning about how when you share, you're sharing visions and you're sharing the influences which lead to the future. We don't know where the future is, so that's why I don't feel as though I'm in control, because we don't know where we're going. So it's a very difficult thing to say what I'm learning, because it's a thing in process, but it's that's what it's something about, learning about control versus lack of control, trust, sharing. It's a bit nebulous, what I'm learning.
Well, still, that was beautifully put. Yeah, just puts you in a different, exciting space, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, something like trust and hope.
Yeah, hope. Yes,
and trust. Yes, I think that's really, really something. Not, that you don't have to be in control all the time. You can just trust and have hope in one another, and we were saying before with Sylvia, we had this great conversation about the importance of interdependency, and that for a really long time it was a bad word to be dependent, and that everyone had to be independent and everyone had to be self-sufficient. It's so much more resilient to be interdependent, so much more resilient to be community sufficient, local community sufficient. And it's really dangerous and lonely to be independent and self-sufficient. And it's individualistic, and we need less of that and more community resilience. And that's really important.
Yep. I've been getting a lot of private messages going, can we have this in North Sydney? And this is a fantastic project. And whether I'm not saying it's going to happen in North Sydney, but people are saying that the lower North Shore of Sydney is just a perfect spot for it, really, for a program like this. And what sort of, how do people start? Where's the starting point, and where do they,
Well, the first starting point is a good 45 minutes phone conversation with me. Because that's where I can really, and I've done this many, many times.
Right. Yeah.
I just did one with a really lovely guy in Tasmania who's starting it just outside Hobart. And it's really a simple process of, I start an incorporated association, get 7 people together, form a committee, start an incorporated association, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of those things. And that's really how you get yourself started, and away you go.
Can I just make a comment there? Going back to your question to the group, Jordan, about, what attributes or beliefs, create success, or that you've learned along the way. I've done quite a lot of work in remote Australia and also in Sydney. And I just echo what everyone's just said, in perhaps through the language of go with what you've got and start small, and always be appreciative and strengths-based. So it's so exciting that people might be interested in something in North Sydney or wherever, in other parts of Sydney. And obviously different communities, different parts of the city have different social networks and different social capital, for want of a better word, or assets that they can draw on. And so that's why I highlighted that Easy Care gardening group. It's just as an example. And Manu, I'm sure you'd have lots of thoughts on this, but start small, but always be appreciative. You've got strengths, not weaknesses, and find a partner or two. And the partner might be someone in council, or, as Catherine said, a group of older farmers who'd love to catch up with young people, or sort of kind of map out the good energy that's around you within an easy footprint, and just go from there.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of this model, is that it's flexible, it's adaptable, and it can cater to different people. So that's, I think, what gets people excited.
Yeah, I think it's quite important, actually, for it not to be a one size fits all. It's really important to do. There's a great, I think it's called the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, TAXI, and they talk about doing an iceberg analysis. It's a systems thinking method of looking at, okay, well, if you look at your community and the things that you can see immediately from day to day is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you can go a bit deeper and look at what's going on, what is this pattern that happens over and over? Why is it happening? What are the social constructs that are enabling it to happen? Go deeper so that you can design from the core what your community actually needs.
Yep, great. I think that's probably it. We're at the time now, and yeah, that's we might wrap up. Does anyone, Anthony, did you want to say any final words before we sort of wrap up? Or?
Oh, just to thank Sylvia and Manu and Catherine and James and you, Jordan, very, very much for, the chance for us all to get together, and to thank everyone who's joined us tonight. I hope you might all be a little bit interested in checking out Nourishing Matters podcast, which is all about healthy and sustainable food systems. And I'd love some more listeners and some feedback. And I'm really looking forward to doing an episode on Farm It Forward from tonight's conversation and a few other conversations I'm having. So just a lovely way to share and grow the cause. So thanks, everybody. Fabulous. And get in touch with me if you want to, because I do quite a bit of work in this space too.
Yeah. I'd like to say, thank you as well, Catherine, Celia, Manu and James as well, for taking the time to talk about your program. For anyone who joined us, if you were inspired by this project, like myself, and I'm sure you were, let's support them through the fundraising. And I'll send all the references to the material that Manu talked about in the books, and the links to what Anthony does, and what everyone, all the speakers are doing and working on tonight. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.